Joining me now, former U.S. diplomat Jim Jatras. Jim, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Liz. Glad to be back.
All right, Jim, I want to go right into this question of the day here about this incident that happened in Fort Lauderdale, this murder. And the question is, Esteban Santiago, is he the latest example? And we've seen this before. It's not exclusive to this. It's not an isolated incident. Is he the latest example, like Omar Mateen in Orlando and Ahmed Khan Rahami in New York and New Jersey, of an identified threat the FBI was aware of? They had him in the palm of their hand, and then they let him slip away?
He could be, and that's where we get into this very delicate question that I think you really hit the nail on, is where do you draw the line between somebody who's just a disturbed individual and engages in a mass shooting and somebody who's engaged in a terrorist attack? Now, for too many people, and frankly, I think for too much law enforcement, they tend to think in terms of links to terrorist organizations rather than to what extent has this individual become attracted to and is operating on an ideology that is readily available on the internet that maybe appeals to some people with various psychological problems. And I don't think we really know yet with this fellow whether they missed some of those signs, the fact that he had been attracted to ISIS literature. There's even been one report that he had signed onto a MySpace page with an Islamic name. I believe it was Ashik Hamad. That hasn't been verified yet, but there are indicators here that they need to be looking more at what his motivations were, however disturbed he might have been.
Right, at least reasons to investigate, in my opinion. And what I'm worried about, Jim, is even if these reports that we're hearing pan out, even if they're able to be substantiated, the MySpace, this FBI report that he visited the office, told them that he was going to fight for ISIS, I'm worried that the Obama administration wouldn't have done anything anyway, that these indicators meant nothing to them. I mean, we heard the Obama administration say, Obama himself say in his exit memo that he said exactly opposite of what the director of national intelligence said. He didn't recognize that the strategy of these terrorists have changed. He said no organized terror group has attacked our nation in the past 8 years. Jim, their strategy has changed. They purposely target people with mental illness that are vulnerable like this. It almost doesn't matter.
Exactly right. And the reason it doesn't matter to them is because it would force them to confront what is the ideology we're talking about. And again, it's that taboo phrase, radical Islamic terrorism. There's a body of belief, Sharia, caliphate, and all of that is there to appeal to certain people. Now, the fact is, even without that ideology, you're still going to have disturbed people committing crimes. But I think you're going to have a lot more of them doing this when you have a justification out there on the internet saying, come do this. You'll find favor with God. You will be somebody. I think will attract a certain kind of sick individual.
Right, and the fact that this guy was sick, I think there's not a lot of argument about that. He clearly displays the signs, the symptoms of being mentally ill here, but this is part of what ISIS targets. They look for people who are dissatisfied with their life, whether it's circumstantial or whether it's instability in emotional and spiritual and mental ways like this. And I don't think that the aspect that he said that he was drawn to ISIS propaganda can and should be ignored for the safety and security of the American people just because he was mentally ill.
That's right. And of course, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop before Obama leaves office. You hear talk about, is there a loophole in our flight security system that people can check guns, check ammunition? I mean, come on. A lot of people travel legally with firearms. They do check them. They're not on the plane and so forth. This really has nothing to do with what happened in this incident. Suppose he had gone off and shot up a supermarket. Would we say, oh, our food supply system is in danger? No. I mean, he was behaving with respect to the weapon in a way that is perfectly reasonable according to law. Unfortunately, he was not a reasonable individual.
Right, and I think when it comes to gun control, in instances like this or in any other terrorist attack, you know, Orlando specifically too, it's not that more gun laws would prevent this type of behavior because criminals or terrorists don't respect the law in the first place. They're already not following the law, so another law isn't going to make that any different. It's just going to put us, legal law-abiding people who will follow the law even if we don't agree with it, that's going to put us in more danger. Like I said, that's what we saw in Orlando. Perhaps that's even what we saw in this instant, although more investigation needs to happen there. But Jim, from a legal aspect here, I want to ask you about this, and I guess this applies also to Omar Mateen as well as the Fort Lauderdale shooter. It seems in a lot of these cases that the benefit of the doubt goes to the terrorists here, and I guess my question is, how is this balanced? Benefit of the doubt going to the terrorists with balancing that you're innocent until proven guilty while keeping people safe?
Well, look, when the FBI talked to him, I don't know to what extent, and that's one thing that really has to be looked into, to what extent they looked at this as a potential terrorist threat in terms of an ideological motivation, as opposed to simply a sick individual who shouldn't have access to a weapon, which they took away for a while and then gave back. The weapon issue relates to a much broader question in society: is when is somebody adjudicated to be sick enough that we take away his firearms? And evidently he hadn't reached that standard at the time he was interviewed. I don't know to what extent they looked into the possible ideological and terrorist motivation.
Right. Well, let me take it one step deeper then, and I guess ask why they didn't look at the terror, why that wasn't the first thing that they looked on. I mean, if someone comes into the FBI office, says that they're thinking about fighting for ISIS, that they've been drawn into watching ISIS propaganda, why isn't that treated automatically like it is a terror threat unless proven otherwise here?
Well, not to make excuses for them, but as I recall, he said that the CIA was making him doing this. They were controlling him. So it's possible that they dismissed the terror or ideological connection as simply the fruit of a disturbed mind, that he thinks, the government's controlling him through his tinfoil hat. That's possible. That's the way they looked at it, and they didn't take it as seriously as they should have.
Right, and to me, that type of eye rolling, and I don't know if that's what happened. You're absolutely correct. We don't know what happened in that specific visit to that FBI office. We don't know the details of the investigation into him. But if there's the potential of that eye rolling, saying, oh, this guy's a nut, he thinks he's being controlled by the CIA, being told to fight for ISIS, that's part of the politicization, I think, of our intelligence community, of our government agencies, because they're taught to ignore this unless it's actually an attack happening right then.
That's right, and that's again where they say, well, it's terrorism if we can find a link to our organization. They don't want to focus on the ideology, and that's the thing that I think is really dropping the ball here, that I hope will change with the new administration coming, thank God, in a few short days.
Right, I guess it's 9-10 days left. Jim, thanks so much for being here. We're out of time, but it's always great to talk to you.